Our speaker today received her Bachelor of Arts from the University of North Carolina, where she majored in public policy and went on to receive her PhD in political science from Rutgers University. She is currently halfway through her first year at Wabash, where she teaches political theory and American politics in the political science department. She has specific teaching and research interests in politics and rhetoric, classic and medieval political thought, interest group in political participation, and misunderstood theorists like Nietzsche and Machiavelli. With a chapel talk entitled, Whether It Is Safer to Fear or Love, please welcome our speaker, Dr. Alexandra Hoerl.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to the Sphinx Club in general for the invitation. The world is funny. It works in funny and not entirely demonstrable ways. Last Tuesday, I was doing some of the minor tasks that I often engage in when I have about 10 minutes before I need to be somewhere, don't want to start something new, but want to make sure that I look busy when Dr. Hadley walks past my office door. I was looking at the Wabash calendar to see if there was anything I needed to add to my own Google Calendar, and as you ought to know, the chapel talks are in their place every Thursday at 11:10. And I was allowing my mind to wander, which visitors to my office know that my mind often tends to do, thinking to myself, what would I give a chapel talk on if I were asked? Because to me, it was simply preposterous that I would even be asked. And then my email said, you have a new message. And I think you all are clever enough to figure out what that message was. It was an invitation from Elliot Allen to give a chapel talk. Now, I, by my own admission, am a bit vain. Anyone who wears red satin heels with sequins on them is vain by definition. So my first reaction was to be flattered. They asked me, this is great. And I had to go to class, so I said, well, yeah, sure, let's talk about it. Let's see what happens. I'll do it later on in the semester. So I get the email back when I come back from class. Can you do it next week? I'm like, well, that's technically later, I suppose. But again, I had another meeting I had to run off to, so put it off my mind. So I finally make it back to my apartment that evening and compose the response. Sure, I'll do this. And then I couldn't hit the send button. I was unable to do so. I thought to myself, maybe I should ask to give a talk on the 25th. I have to give a talk at Notre Dame tomorrow on my research, and I want to make sure that I can do right by both talks. It's been kind of a long month. I've had a bunch of talks. I mean, you ask my classes that meet on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They haven't seen me in, like a month. So maybe I should have to do it in the spring, when there's not, trips to places where I have to see 30 inches of snow on the ground. The political science department was in Philadelphia when it got hit with all that snow, which was interesting in a number of ways. So I thought to myself, will I actually be ready to do this come spring? Why am I putting this off? Why am I procrastinating? Why do I want to punt on this? I knew that I'd feel the same way deep in my heart if I said, sure, I'll do it in March, or sure, I'll do it in April. Because you guys think you know how to procrastinate. You think you have some knowledge of this. But I am a master of that form. I knew what was holding me up. I was terrified, absolutely bolt terrified to accept the invitation. Not to just give the chapel talk the same week as a talk on my research, not to give the chapel talk when I was too tired to do it, not because I was so busy during the month of February. I was frightened of revealing too much about myself. This will come as kind of a shock to people who have come to my office hours and sat there for 3 hours while I ramble on about various and sundry, but I'm actually kind of the secretive sort. More to the point, I was frightened that you guys would hate it, or hate me, or think I was lame, or not funny, or thank God that I've had some laughs so far so I can, proceed onward. I don't even know what. I was just scared. And I was using every excuse and every rationalization that I could think of to put off this invitation. I was trying to avoid confrontation with the fact that I was frightened, and not just frightened for absolutely terrible reasons. And to my credit, at this point, I got pissed off at myself. I slammed down the mouse button, an affirmative response, and then I said to myself, oh, I'm out of my freaking mind, except for those of you who've had me in class. You know I didn't say freaking, but I'm being filmed, so discretion is the greater part of valor. Thank you. The next thing I did, I kid you not, the very next thing I did was bought myself a new pair of red shoes online for moral, if not actual support. I would come across the podium to show you them because they're really awesome, but I'm very clumsy. I almost broke my ankle coming out of the stands at Chadwick this weekend. I routinely bang my hand or my back and things in the classroom. I would probably fall off the stage if I did. Has anybody ever fallen off the stage at a chapel talk? It could be a first. Oh, how exciting. But just take my word for it, the shoes I'm wearing are spectacular, and that should be the major take-home point of this talk. Dr. Hoerl has awesome shoes. So one good thing besides the new shoes came from this bout of fear. I had a topic. Whew. We all know, I mean, not that any of us ever write our papers at the last moment, of course, but we all know that the fear of doing so is greatly lessened once you actually know what you want to say. Having a topic gives you a sense of control over the entire thing. So control is more important. It's more important to some of us than it is to others, and I don't think it's particularly daring for me to say that more often than not, when we talk about fear, what we're really talking about is the fear of a loss of control. That particular fear to me is much different than the type of fear with a specific referent. It's okay to be afraid if somebody has a gun to your head. There's probably something wrong with you if you're not. The type of fear that I'm talking about is this sort of nebulous fear of losing control that doesn't really have a specific referent, but that just moves from object to object. It's the fear that holds you back. It's the fear that makes you play safe all the time. Now, some of you know that I'm quite keen on the Christopher Nolan Batman films, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. I think the reason that I'm so taken with them is that they play out my greatest fantasy, which is to go around to random strangers and say, "Would you like to see my mask?" Maybe I'm kidding, maybe I'm not. But seriously, I think that these films provide an absolutely fascinating blueprint. They show a man who first starts to understand his fear, and as a consequence, understand himself. And then he proceeds to train and improve himself so that his control over his mind and his body increase, and the control that fear holds over him decreases. Decreasing fear's powers. This sounds like some sort of magical elixir, some sort of promise that I would read in one of my beloved medieval treatises, but it would sure be nice. No more knot in the stomach before I give a talk on my research. No more butterflies and thoughts of, is this going to be the time that this doesn't work when I turn my class loose in one of my simulation exercises? Maybe I wouldn't have joked about faking my own death before giving my talk this morning. I actually did. You can ask Himsel and Hadley. I said, I've got 30 minutes to do it. I could just disappear, but here I am. I am very risk-averse and occasionally, every now and again, self-reflective, so I have actually asked myself, why do I do these things? It's a question with a really easy answer, not just an easy answer because I'm pretty smart. I talk about my research because I love it. I walk into the classroom and turn the students loose in the simulation because I love teaching and I love my students, and usually my students do funny things, which is cool. And I agreed to give this talk because even though I haven't really been here that long, I really, really love this place. I remember my job interview, speaking of terrifying, and all that came along with it. Was this place right for me? Could I do well here? How would I know if I could do well here? Now, a number of conversations and encounters convinced me that, yeah, I could do well here. And one of the most important of those was when I learned about the school's unofficial motto. I think it was Dr. Butler, but I can't exactly recall, who told me about Wabash Always Fights. And I think the reason I can't remember who told me was because once I heard it, my mind sort of started to daydream because I couldn't get over how cool that was. Wabash Always Fights. It tickled my fancy then. It tickles my fancy still. I think it represents something that is so awesome about this place. It's a positive place where you go out and you actually tackle things. I went to graduate school sort of near New York City, and for years I was just surrounded by people who allowed themselves to wallow in sort of hate and apathy and would never positively claim that they liked anything. And it was always, oh, well, I'm just doing that ironically. Yeah. And I never realized how sick I was of that. I mean, at some level, screw that. I mean, quite seriously. I mean, put yourself out there. And that's what Wabash Always Fights means to me. It's about putting yourself out there in a positive way, and I just can't get over how awesome I think it is. How awesome when I hear people chanting it at the basketball games, and all those things. Also, Wabash Always Fights is Machiavellian. I adore Machiavelli, you see. Some of you may already know this. Some of you, hi Tommy, may even be in my Machiavelli class this semester. Unfortunately, I can't give extra credit or anything for that, but I really appreciate your attendance here. The title of my talk is a play, of course, on the infamous chapter 17 of The Prince concerning cruelty and clemency and whether it is better to be loved or feared. Now, while Machiavelli uses the word better in the chapter title, In the text of the chapter, and I apologize, a couple of you have heard me riff on this, so bear with me. He doesn't claim that it's better to be feared. He says it's safer to be feared. And there's a huge difference there. A prince isn't supposed to want to be feared instead of loved because there's something morally superior about being able to inspire fear in others. He's simply supposed to recognize that there is more security in being feared than there is in being loved, and that it would be wise for him to pursue that security in his rule so that he can pursue the ends that his love for his principality calls him to. Now, much in the same way that it is safer but not better for the prince to inspire fear instead of love, it is safer but not better for those of us here to fear instead of love. I can't speak for my noble colleagues on the faculty, though I hope that most of them would agree with what I'm about to say here, but I deeply, truly believe, possibly with more certainty and constancy than I believe in anything else in my life, that what a good liberal arts education is supposed to do is prepare you to leave the safe harbor, to encounter your fear, and to go forth as lovers and devotees and defenders of all the good and decent things in this world. And as a professor, I am strongly committed to this mission. And one of the reasons that I have become so enchanted with Wabash after such a short time is because I believe it's a truly superlative place for me to go about doing that work. Because at its best, and unfortunately Wabash isn't always at its best, but when it is at its best, this is a place that inspires love and loyalty to a core set of ideas about the way we ought to do and ought to study things. And through that love and loyalty, members of this community can be pushed and challenged to face their fears and equipped with the skills to overcome them. Now, I know it doesn't always work perfectly, and sometimes we all don't love each other as we ought to do. But I have found these things for myself at Wabash. I've been overwhelmed by the acts of kindness from my colleagues and from my students that I have encountered since coming here. When I go to Sparks, there are always students who come down, sit with me, talk with me, so I don't have to be the kid who's sitting alone in the lunchroom. I mean, I appreciate these sorts of things. One of my students last semester would come by every Friday afternoon after one of his classes to say, I hope you have a good weekend. Guys would come in, how's it going? How are you feeling? Are you liking it here? I mean, this care, I really appreciate it. I think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. I hope that everyone here has found this for themselves at Wabash or is actively looking for it. For me, Tuesday and the events surrounding Tuesday's faculty meeting were a stark reminder of the way that love works here at Wabash. All of the students who lined up in Lilly to make sure that the faculty understood their voice and support for C&T stood out there for an hour and 15 minutes, out of love for this college and love for the liberal arts. Some of them, including students whom I am proud, extraordinarily proud, to call my own, had previously sent out emails articulating their positions, and they sent those emails out of the same love for Wabash. Now, I'm sure that the students who chose to engage in these acts had at least a little fear. Would they be judged by their fellow students for sending those emails or for standing there? Or, perhaps even more scary, would they be judged by the faculty for their action? But because of their love and commitment to their principles, and because they had, or at least I hope that they had, enough trust in their fellow students and faculty to know that they wouldn't face any sort of retribution for going public with their support in this way, out there they stood. I think it is this trust and love for the college and for its mission that allows us to push each other on this and a whole variety of things. Our love pushes us past that fear and that apathy and that I'm doing it ironically crap that holds us back from really engaging with each other and listening to each other. Sometimes the exchanges do not seem particularly loving, but, and this is perhaps the optimist in me, and I think that for a while I was ashamed of it, but after having been here for just such a short time, I'm not as ashamed of it anymore. I am still an optimist. I hope that even when we're cross with each other, we can still overcome our fear of judgment and discuss things in a serious, reflective way because we are all part of and committed to something here at this college. Now, of course, love is not without its problems, and I want to draw your attention to two. First, love helps you to overcome fear, but a courageous act done out of love is scary for an entirely different reason. Such an act proclaims your love for the world. There's no concealing your devotion once you've actually done something about it. Acts of love reveal secrets, and they put us in an uncomfortable spotlight. Revealed devotion can become rejected devotion, and I don't think I really need to particularly dwell on how awful that feels. Furthermore, sometimes love fades, or the person, the place, or the principle that you once loved is transformed beyond recognition and is no longer lovable to you. John Lennon wrote about this in sort of an uncharacteristically optimistic statement in the song In My Life. As for my part, I found that the transformation of the beloved is often much more painful than the immediate rejection. While the lingering disappointment isn't as acute as the blunt rejection, and you don't feel it burning across your cheeks in the same way that that immediate rejection does, the disappointment over the change haunts your mind in a different way. It allows you to while in your own private prison of humiliation every single time you revisit all the acts and all the proclamations of love that eventually turned into dust, and you say to yourself, "What a fool I was." There are days, and I pray that for all of us here, they're just here and now, when we look back at the things that we've done in our lives and think to ourselves, I can't believe I put myself out there like that. In giving this very talk, I have left myself wide open for cynical people and for people who know that of course it's safer to fear than love and have let that fact control their actions. I've given them the ability to point at me, maybe even to laugh at me and mock me, saying, "What became of your precious love if, God forbid, something goes wrong?" But I'm still up here, and that's all well and good. And I give myself a pat on the back, and I award myself 5 points, and a gold star, which unfortunately I don't have up here, and many other positive things. However, the Beatles, and by the way, I really like the Beatles, just in case you were wondering, who didn't miss very often, led us astray when they told us that all you need is love. And that's the second problem with love. As fantastic as it is, it's insufficient. While it's true that there's no one I can save who can't be saved, and there's nothing you can do but learn how to be you in time, unless you thoughtfully consider what it is to save or be saved, what you are now and what you want to be later, love will fail you, because your love will fall victim to the fear and confusion that lurk at the lining of all acts of love. Like Bruce Wayne, you all need to learn to understand your fears, and by way of that, understand yourselves. Then you need to learn how to control the negative effects of that fear. You need education to learn what it is and ought to be to love something properly, to learn what is a worthy object for your love, to learn how to develop yourself as a complete person who can exercise that combination of skill and force and control that Machiavelli called virtue, that will allow you to repel fear when it threatens to undo your good works. And so you read your philosophy and your psychology and your physics and God save your souls, your political theory. You learn some of the facts about the way our world is and the way it works, because there's neither honor nor a good end in loving falsehood, and as lovers, this should be the first thing that you learn to avoid. You learn different ways of knowing and demonstrating things so that you can have a subtle understanding of our truth and how humans relate to it. You think about humans. What are our ultimate capabilities? Are there limits to what we can do? Forces that we cannot entirely tame? Machiavelli suggested that no matter what, fortune would control at least part of our actions, and all we could do is struggle against her the best we can. Do we want to accept that claim? Or do we want to deny that there is something like fortune? What force do we imagine in her place? How do we understand and observe that force? What if there is no force? What then, Yoda? I hope that every one of you, every last one of you, see that these are the questions that lurk behind the work that you are doing in all of your classes at Wabash. However, as you've been told countless times by many others more experienced and more learned in these things than I can yet possibly be, education at Wabash is about more than the content of your courses. You have to learn the skills of overcoming your fear, articulating and defending your position, grappling with the unexpected slings and arrows of fortune. I believe in fortune, you see. Learning trust and the gentility and respect that follow from trust. All of these skills, of course, you practice in your seminars. And so now I'm going to talk about my medievalism students from last semester, because, as everybody in Baxter knows, I talk about them all the time. I can't help it. These were two guys who didn't really know each other that well, or may have not even known each other at all. At this point, I can't even really remember, but were forced by necessity to respond to a somewhat awkward situation. 2 students, 1 professor, infinite pressure. Since there were only 2 of them, they had a choice to make. Were they going to each look out for number 1, Or were they going to look out for each other and not try and leave the other person sort of high and dry and commit to doing all the reading and attending class? Not for me as the instructor, because that would be an utterly preposterous notion, but for each other. And they chose the nobler path. They gained each other's trust, and because they trusted each other, man, they were able to do some really cool things. Not only did they learn lots of exciting new content and material and develop really exciting research questions, their ability to engage in true conversation and dialogue, to effectively and humanely question the assumptions and the positions of another person, improved by leaps and bounds. They discussed the most controversial topics, topics that secretly make professors a little nervous when they come up in class, without any incident whatsoever. They asked brave questions of each other, and they were able to do these things because of the trust that they had in each other and their common affection for learning. It was an awesome experience, and I know I haven't been at this as long as some other people have, but it honestly remains one of the highlights of my teaching career to date. In fact, one of these students who was teasing me at the time, but I took his question very seriously, put to me a query worthy of my Florentine master. He wanted to know whether or not I had the opportunity, or what I took to grab the opportunity presented to give a chapel talk. He didn't know what I was planning to talk about, but I hope that he understands why I gave him kind of a wry little smile in response, and may have looked like I was going to pass out at the time. So whether or not I succeeded in grabbing that opportunity is not for me to decide. I leave that in your hands. But that I was able to get up here at all and say what I've said is a result of the love and the trust and the faith that I have received from every corner of the Wabash community, its students, its faculty, its staff, its administration, and more since I arrived here last semester. Indeed, I'm pretty sure that the Lexi Hoerl of 3 or 4 years ago could not have accepted this invitation. Many times in the past, and particularly at that point in time in my life, I let the fear of losing control, the fear of being laughed at, hold me back. And whether I rationalized that fear as a need to keep control for good reasons, or a need to be responsible, or something else, in the end, all that it meant was that I took the safe route, and I passed on a number of opportunities that I probably should have seized. And I dare say that many of you in this room have done the same. But not today. Today, I stand before you as a loving, committed member of the Wabash community. You've been really good to me. You've been really good for me. You've helped me overcome my fear. You've helped me work on my pride and my vanity, although I'm still going to wear the shoes because they're cool, and all other sorts of things. In fact, and this is God's honest truth, my parents are so impressed with the change in my behavior from where I was a couple of years ago, they want to come visit Wabash. They want to come for homecoming next year. My mother is, she's really excited about the homecoming queen competition, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I mean, you know, it is what it is, you know, so. This is sort of karmic retribution, by the way, because this year for Parents Weekend, I took great pleasure in, you know, if I saw a student whose parents were there, I'm like, oh boy, I get to go embarrass the student, like, hi, I'm so-and-so's teacher, you know. The guy's like, oh my God, please go away, you know. And now, my parents are going to be here next year, and I hope that every last one of you go up there and, you know, you introduce yourselves, and they can tell humiliating stories about me, and it's going to be a grand old time. It's only what I deserve, because the world works in funny and not entirely demonstrable ways. I hope that you have the courage to love that about the world. I hope that you have the courage to find something to love here at Wabash. And finally, for God's sake, I hope that you find the courage here to love each other. Thank you, Wabash. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hoerl. Got a quick couple announcements. Tennis has a home match against Oberlin Saturday morning at 9 a.m. at Collett Tennis Center. Basketball has a home game against Kenyon Saturday at 3 p.m. at Chadwick Court. And good luck to the track and field teams. They travel to Greencastle for a meet Saturday at 3 p.m. Let's all rise and sing Old Wabash.